Miss Hart, take your hand off that water gate. The deputy's order carried across the creek before Clara could answer me. One heartbeat earlier, I had been leaning against the fence, watching her fit a brass key into the lock. I had told her without meaning to, that whichever man married her would be the luckiest fool in the county. Clara had gone still. Then she looked straight at me and whispered, "I was hoping it would be you." I had not found my next breath when the deputy rode down the bank with a notice. Silas Vale followed. He had once been engaged to Clara. Now he worked for the bank, had begun buying water rights west of town, sat beside the county clerk at public meetings, and could make a threat sound like concern. His eyes settled on the key. "That belongs to her father's estate." Clara closed her fingers around it. "My father gave it to me." "Your father cannot speak clearly enough to give anyone anything," Silas replied. The deputy dismounted and flattened the notice against the fence post. The accusations came one after another. Forgery of her father's signature, illegal control of the Hart ranch, tampering with the head gate that supplied water to 3 neighboring properties. Then he reached the final line. "Eli Mercer," he read. "Alleged accomplice." The brass key tapped once against Clara's ring. She turned toward me. Courage remained in her face, but fear had reached her eyes. Silas watched us with the satisfied smile of a man who had planned not only the accusation, but the moment it would hurt most. For 5 years, I had let this county believe the worst of me, because I mistook silence for dignity. Now that silence had placed Clara's ranch, her father's name, and perhaps her freedom in Silas Vale's hands. She had trusted me with the truth of what she wanted. I still did not know whether she had trusted me with the whole truth. But if Silas thought I would stand beside that creek and let him write the rest of her story, he had arrived 5 years too late. Deputy Ross folded the notice along its old crease. "I am not arresting anyone today," he said, "but the gate stays shut until the county hearing." Clara glanced toward the east pasture. The Hart cattle were already crowding the lower trough. By sundown, it would be dry. "That hearing is 12 days away," she said. Ross shifted his weight. His sympathy made no difference to thirsty cattle. The order came from Judge Bell. "On whose petition?" I asked. Silas answered before Ross could. "On evidence submitted by the bank and by Samuel Hart." Clara's hand slipped from the lock. "Samuel is in Cheyenne. He returned last night." Her younger brother had not set foot in Cedar Hollow for nearly 3 years. He had left after a fight with their father and written Clara only twice since. Silas stepped closer to the fence, careful not to muddy his polished boots. "You should give me the key," he said. "If it remains in your possession, people may assume you intend to violate the order. People seem to assume whatever you hand them on paper." His smile held, but it arrived a fraction late, I noticed. Clara pulled the blue ribbon over her head and closed the key inside her fist. "The key stays with me." Ross cleared his throat. "Miss Hart, I need to record that you refused to surrender disputed property. My father made that key for me when I was 16. Silas looked toward the deputy. "You see the difficulty. I climbed over the fence. Every man on that bank understood the movement. Until then, I had stood on my land and Clara on hers. Silas had been able to describe us as neighbors caught in the same unfortunate dispute. The moment my boots touched the Hart side of the creek, I became a choice." Clara stared at me. I did not reach for her. I did not tell her everything would be fine. Promises like that cost nothing. I faced Ross. "Put this in your record. The key was already in Miss Hart's possession when I arrived. I saw her use it last spring, under Thomas Hart's direction. I have never witnessed her alter a deed, threaten a boundary, or interfere with another property's water." Silas's jaw tightened. Ross opened his notebook. "And your interest in the Hart water line?" "My cattle drink from my own well." "That is not what I asked," Silas said. "No, it is the answer you hoped no one would hear." Clara drew a breath beside me. The creek moved around stones below the gate, bright and useless, while the troughs waded downstream. Silas lowered his voice. "Eli, you should be careful. Grief has made people generous in their judgment of you. Do not spend what remains of that generosity on a woman who has not told you everything." There it was. He knew which wound to press. 5 winters earlier, my wife, Anne, had died while I was across the ridge searching for 2 missing ranch hands. By the time I returned, fever had taken her voice. She died before dawn. Her sister told anyone who would listen that I had chosen cattle over my wife. I never corrected her. The missing men had been 16 and 17. One had a broken leg. Both would have frozen if I had turned back. Explaining meant weighing their lives against Anne's. So I let the county decide I was cold. Silas knew silence had worked on me once. Clara did too. She looked at him with a steadiness that made her fear more visible, not less. What exactly are you accusing Eli of doing? Silas removed a second paper from his coat. The transfer assigns management of the Hart Ranch to you and grants Mercer Ranch emergency use of the East Channel. That clause was my father's idea, Clara said. Then he can confirm it at the hearing. Her father could speak 4 or 5 words on a good day. On a bad one, only his eyes answered. Silas held out the page. At the bottom sat Thomas Hart's name in a shaky hand. Clara did not touch it. I watched her face instead. She knew that signature. More than that, she feared it. Is it his? I asked. Silas turned toward me. Ask her whether she has ever signed Thomas Hart's name. Ross stopped writing. The question settled over the bank heavier than the heat. Clara's thumb moved across the worn crescent in the key. She could have denied it. She could have called Silas a liar, and part of me wanted her to. Instead, she said, "Not on that document." Ross's pencil remained above the page. Silas's expression did not change, but triumph sharpened it. That was not the question. Clara looked at me then. The honesty from one heartbeat earlier was gone. In its place was the face of someone standing at the edge of a truth she had hoped to cross later. Before she could speak, a wagon rattled over the hill road. Samuel Hart held the reins. He had our father's gray coat across his shoulders and a leather document case beside him. Clara took one step toward the road. Samuel pulled the horses to a stop but did not climb down. "You should have told me," he said. "Told you what? That you planned to take everything before he died." Clara went pale. Silas finally looked pleased without hiding it. Samuel lifted the leather case. "I brought the papers Silas says are original." The brass key shifted in Clara's hand. A faint metallic click came from inside the headgate box. Not the lock. Something behind it. Clara heard it too. Her eyes moved to the rusted door. Silas followed her gaze. For the first time that afternoon, concern left his face. "Deputy," he said quickly. "Seal the box." "Seal it? With what authority?" Clara asked. Deputy Ross had already taken a strip of red cloth from his saddlebag. "The same order that closes the gate." Silas pointed toward the rusted box. "Until the hearing, nothing inside can be disturbed." Samuel climbed down from the wagon with the leather case beneath his arm. Dust covered his boots, but he wore their father's coat. "You went into his room. He asked me to bring these. He cannot ask for coffee without fighting for the word." Samuel's face tightened. "You are not the only person who understands him." The old argument stood between them. Clara had stayed. Samuel had left. Each had built a version of the other that made the choice easier to defend. Ross threaded the cloth through the latch and pressed county wax over the knot. The faint click inside the box did not come again. Silas watched the seal cool. "We can discuss temporary water access at the bank tomorrow," he said, "provided Clara cooperates." "No," I said. Clara turned toward me. A refusal should have been enough. Instead, I reached for an old habit. "We can settle this privately." Silas's expression softened. "That is exactly what I want." Clara stepped away from the gate. "No, Eli. It is exactly what he wants." I lowered my voice. "Your cattle need water. A hearing will not fill the trough. And a private agreement will not make those papers true. It may keep the ranch alive long enough to prove they are false." She studied me as though the man by the fence had changed shape. "You think endurance and surrender are different because one sounds nobler." Silas adjusted his cuffs. "Perhaps this conversation should continue without an audience." "That has been your preferred arrangement for years," Clara said. His eyes hardened. "Ross warned us not to touch the gate, the lock, or the sealed box." Then he rode toward town carrying his notebook and every sentence we had given him. Samuel placed the leather case in the wagon bed. Clara touched the case, but did not open it. "Those are bank copies." Samuel's grip tightened on the handle. "Silas says they match the original. I am taking father to the hearing." "He cannot sit through that," Clara said. "He deserves to hear what was done in his name. What was done was keeping his ranch running while you spent 3 years pretending Cheyenne was too far away for letters." Samuel's jaw moved once. Silas stepped between them before the fight could become useful to anyone but him. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. My office." He walked back to his horse. Samuel followed without saying goodbye. Clara waited until the wagon disappeared, then crossed the pasture toward the Hart House, fast enough to discourage company. I followed anyway. The ranch sat half a mile east of the creek. Thomas had built the first room from cottonwood logs, then added a kitchen, a narrow second floor, and a porch that leaned south despite every repair. Clara entered through the kitchen and went directly to the water pail. It was less than half full. She poured a cup, carried it down the hall, and paused outside her father's room. Thomas Hart lay beneath a light quilt, despite the heat. His right hand rested stiffly against his chest. His left moved when Clara touched his wrist. "Samuel came home," she told him. Thomas blinked once. "He brought your gray coat." A longer blink. Clara placed the brass key on the table where he could see it. The crescent cut into the bow, caught the afternoon light. Thomas's fingers moved toward it, but stopped short. Clara guided his hand until his fingertips touched the metal. "Did you give this to me?" His hand pressed down. "Yes, once." Thomas's eyes shifted toward me. "Eli," he managed. "I'm here." His mouth worked again. "Box." Clara leaned closer. "What about it?" He dragged one finger across the table, then tapped twice beneath the key. "Inside?" she asked. One blink. "What did you put there?" His breathing roughened. Clara stopped questioning him and raised the cup to his mouth. When she set it down, his eyes remained on me. "Stay," he said. Thomas pushed the key weakly across the table. I did not take it. "It belongs with Clara." His fingers tightened. Clara removed it from beneath his palm. "He is asking you to stay with this." "With the ranch?" "With me, perhaps." No hope entered her voice. Only exhaustion. Thomas slept soon after. Clara counted the water left in the pitcher. Outside, cattle called from the lower field. "We can haul water from my well," I said. "For how long?" "As long as needed. Your north pasture is already dry." "I know my land. And I know what happens when a man offers more than he can afford because he is afraid to say what he means." "What do you think I mean?" "That you want to fix this before anyone has to hear the ugly part." She was not speaking only about Silas. 5 years earlier, Anne had begun coughing in January. By February, she could not climb the stairs without stopping. Then a blizzard broke the north fence and trapped 2 hired boys beyond the ridge. Anne told me to go. Her sister arrived after I left. By the time I brought the boys home, the story had already been written. Eli Mercer had abandoned his dying wife for cattle. Anne lived 3 more days, but never recovered enough to contradict it. I could have explained that the boys had names, that one was bleeding into his boot, and that Anne had put my gloves in my hands and ordered me through the door. But her sister begged me not to tell anyone Anne had sent me. She could not bear the town saying Anne chose strangers over her final hours with her husband. So I protected her grief and let the lie settle over me. People stopped inviting me to supper. Women lowered their voices when I entered the store. I learned that a quiet man could be convicted without anyone raising a gavel. "You never corrected them," Clara said. "No." "Why?" "The truth would have hurt someone who was already grieving, and the lie only hurts you." I had no answer that did not sound like pride wearing a decent coat. "You do not defend yourself, Eli. You wait until everyone gets tired of being wrong. Most people eventually do." "Silas will not." The cattle called again. Clara rubbed the crescent on the key with her thumb. "I signed my father's name once," she said. My shoulders tightened. "On what?" "A medicine order last winter. He was unconscious. The supplier would not release the laudanum without authorization." "Did Silas see you?" "He brought the form. There it was. Not guilt, but an opening wide enough for guilt to be manufactured." "Why did you not tell Ross?" "Because Silas did not ask whether I forged the transfer. He asked whether I had ever signed father's name, and the answer is yes." "Yes," she held my gaze. "I will tell the truth at the hearing. All of it. Silas will use it. He already has." My first instinct was still to bargain. Keep the cattle alive. Keep Thomas out of court. Give Silas some harmless concession and fight later. That instinct had kept me quiet at Anne's funeral. It had also kept the lie alive for 5 years. Clara picked up the empty water pail. "If we go to his office tomorrow, he will offer peace in exchange for the part of the truth he needs." "What do you suggest?" "We do not go to the bank." "Then where?" She lifted the brass key from the table. "To the woman who sent the telegram my father could no longer sign. By sunrise, 6 Hart cattle had pushed through the lower fence searching for water. Clara and I spent the first hour driving them back, while Thomas watched from the porch. The animals moved slowly, tongues showing, their sides dusty from the dry pasture. I brought 2 barrels from my well. Clara helped guide the wagon beneath the kitchen cistern, but she did not thank me. That was deliberate. Gratitude would have turned practical help into a debt neither of us wanted named. When the last barrel was covered, she tied the brass key beneath her collar. "Nora opens the telegraph office at 8, she said. "You are certain she remembers your father's message?" "Nora remembers every word anyone sends, and half the words they regret not sending." The office stood between the feed store and the county newspaper, a narrow building with a bell over the door and blue curtains that had faded almost white. A telegraph sounder clicked on the back table when we entered. Nora Briggs sat behind the counter wearing spectacles low on her nose. She glanced at Clara, then at me, and reached over to close the front shade. I heard Ross sealed the headgate. "News travels quickly," Clara said. "Bad news owns a faster horse." Nora locked the door. She was 60, widowed twice, and unimpressed by men who mistook volume for authority. She had delivered news of births, deaths, debts, pardons, and wars. People trusted her with messages because she never repeated them. That morning, trust made her frightened. "The county clerk came yesterday," she said. "He asked to inspect my transmission books." "Did he have a warrant?" I asked. "He had a smile and a reminder that my license is renewed in September." Clara set both hands on the counter. "Did you show him Father's telegram?" "I told him the book was in storage." "Was that true?" Nora pointed toward a stack of flour tins beneath the stove. It became true shortly afterward. She lifted the smallest tin and removed a cloth-wrapped ledger. The binding had separated at the corners. Each page held dates, destinations, fees, and messages compressed into Nora's sharp handwriting. She turned to March 14. Thomas Hart's name appeared beside a transmission to the Colorado Land Office in Denver. Clara's shoulders lowered slightly. "Read it," she said. Nora adjusted her spectacles. "Due to incapacity following illness, I appoint my daughter, Clara Hart, acting manager of Hart Ranch, including authority over livestock, payroll, contracts, and established water access. Emergency East Channel use may be granted to Mercer Ranch during drought or fire. Full instrument follows by registered post." My name sat in the middle of Thomas Hart's intentions, not as a partner, not as an owner, as a neighbor permitted to use water only when lives or land were in danger. Silas had described the clause as payment for helping Clara seize the ranch. "Who dictated this?" I asked. "Thomas. He could still speak in March?" "Not enough for a message that long." Dr. Avery brought the letterboard. Thomas selected each word. Clara was not present. Clara turned toward Nora. "You never told me that. Your father asked me not to until Denver confirmed receipt. He did not want Samuel or Silas interfering before the record was entered." The sounder clicked behind us. Nora ignored it. "Who witnessed him?" I asked. "Dr. Avery and me. That was more than a rumor, and less than victory." Avery had left for Kansas in May. Nora's license could be threatened. Thomas might not survive a hostile hearing. Still, it was the first piece of the story Silas had not written. Nora opened a drawer and took out a narrow receipt bearing the land office stamp. Confirmation arrived 11 days later. Clara reached for it, then stopped before touching the paper. The receipt acknowledged Thomas's telegram and requested the signed instrument within 30 days. In the upper corner, someone had written 3 small letters in violet pencil. S.V. My hand remained on the counter. "Silas collected this?" Nora nodded. "He said he was acting for the family." Clara's face lost color. "You gave it to him?" "You were still engaged. He had collected bank notices and registered letters for Thomas before." Clara read the initials again. Silas had claimed he learned about the transfer only after Samuel brought him the disputed papers. The receipt proved he knew months earlier. "Did you tell him what the telegram said?" I asked. "I did not need to." The confirmation repeated the appointment in the first paragraph. "Why did he keep the receipt?" "He returned it the next morning." Nora turned the paper over. A faint blue smear crossed the back, as though it had rested against fresh ink. Clara took the brass key from beneath her collar and placed it beside the receipt. The crescent in the bow matched a crescent-shaped mark pressed into the paper. "That is Father's desk seal," she said. "Not the key?" "The same metalworker made both. Father used the seal on private ranch papers." "Who had access to it?" Her fingers remained near the key. Father. Me. She stopped. And Silas, I said. He handled contracts when father first became ill. The answer was reasonable. It still hurt. Not because she had trusted the man she intended to marry, because every step toward the truth seemed to reveal another door Silas had been allowed to open. How long did you know he had collected this? I asked. I did not, but you knew he had the seal. Yes. And you did not mention it at the gate. Ross was writing down every word. So you gave him only the safest truth. Her chin lifted. I gave him the truth I could prove. That is not the same thing. Nora moved the receipt away from both of us. You two can injure each other after we finish saving the evidence. The correction was deserved. She carried the ledger to the telegraph table and slid a sheet of thin paper beneath the march page. Then she rubbed the side of a pencil across it. Indented lines appeared where Nora had written on a missing sheet above. Clara leaned closer. The first words were faint but readable. Duplicate confirmation requested. Below them, deliver to S. Vale, Cedar Hollow Bank. The request had been sent on March 27, 2 days after Silas collected the first receipt and nearly 4 months before he claimed to discover the transfer. Nora continued shading. A final line emerged. Fee paid from Hart account. Clara's hand closed around the edge of the table. He used father's money to obtain a private copy. And then built a case pretending he had never seen it, I said. Nora stopped rubbing the page. The lower half of the impression ended abruptly. She checked the ledger binding, then the pile of loose papers in the flour tin. What is missing? Clara asked. The reply from Denver. I copied it onto the next page. Nora searched again, faster this time. The page had been cut out close to the spine. Who knew the ledger was here? I asked. No one. A wagon wheel struck a rut outside. All three of us went still. Nora opened the edge of the curtain with one finger. Samuel Hart stood across the street beside Silas. Silas was watching the telegraph office. Samuel held a small folding knife in his hand. The harvest supper had been planned before the water dispute, which meant canceling would have looked like guilt and attending would look like defiance. Clara chose defiance. 2 evenings after our visit to the telegraph office, she entered the church hall carrying an apple cake in both hands. The brass key remained hidden beneath her collar. I followed with Thomas's folding chair under one arm. More than 60 people had come. Ranchers stood near the cider barrels. Their wives arranged pies beneath paper labels. Children ran between benches until Reverend Cole threatened to put them to work peeling potatoes. Conversations thinned as Clara crossed the floor. No one openly accused her. That would have required courage. They watched instead. Thomas sat near the front beside Samuel. His gray coat hung loosely from his shoulders. Clara had objected to bringing him, but Samuel insisted their father had squeezed his hand when asked. Silas stood near the platform speaking with Mr. Pritchard from the bank and County Clerk Danner. Deputy Ross remained by the rear door. The arrangement was too deliberate to be accidental. Nora appeared beside me with a covered dish. Samuel did not cut my ledger, she said quietly. You asked him? I saw the knife. The blade was clean, and he had bought it that morning at Powell's store. Why was he standing with Silas? Because a man can be innocent of one thing and useful to the wrong person in 6 others. Before I could answer, Silas struck a spoon against a glass. Reverend Cole frowned. We have not said grace. This cannot wait. That was the first lie of the evening. Silas stepped onto the low platform holding 3 sheets of paper. He apologized to the Reverend, to Thomas, and to every family whose water depended on the East Channel. Then he turned private suspicion into public duty. As many of you have heard, irregular documents were recently used to transfer control of the Hart Ranch, while Mr. Hart was medically unable to protect his interests. Clara set the cake on the nearest table. Silas raised the copied transfer. The bank has reason to believe this instrument is fraudulent. The word moved farther than his voice. Mrs. Collins stopped pouring cider. Amos Reed, whose cattle drank below the Hart property, shifted away from Clara. County Clerk Danner lowered his eyes, as though embarrassment were proof of fairness. Silas continued. The document grants Miss Hart control of the ranch and provides emergency water privileges to Mercer Ranch. Those privileges would increase the value of Mr. Price, Mercer's land, while reducing the security held by the bank. A man near the kitchen asked, Did Thomas sign it? That is precisely what the county must determine. He did not say no. He let the crowd say it for him. Clara moved toward the platform. Samuel caught her arm. Let him finish. Take your hand off me. Thomas made a sound from his chair. Samuel released her. But the delay had done its work. People had seen a sister needing restraint. Silas lifted the second page. There is also the matter of Miss Hart's admitted practice of signing her father's name. Nora's dish struck the table harder than necessary. That was a medicine order, Clara said. Silas faced her with practiced regret. So you acknowledge the signature? I acknowledge one signature. Not yours to move wherever you please. Murmurs rose near the cider barrels. Silas waited for them to settle. No one wants to shame you, Clara. Then you chose a strange room for kindness. A few people glanced down. No one laughed. I stepped forward, but Nora caught my sleeve. He is waiting for you. She was right. Silas's third paper bore my name. Mr. Mercer has described himself as an uninvolved neighbor. Yet Deputy Ross witnessed him cross onto Hart property and declare his support immediately after Miss Hart expressed a personal attachment to him. Heat climbed the back of my neck. Silas did not repeat Clara's words. He did not need to. Ask him what I said, Clara demanded. Silas kept his attention on me. Did you tell Miss Hart that the man who married her would be fortunate? Every face turned. The old answer formed automatically. This is private. I had used those words after Anne died. I had used them whenever someone asked why I was not with her during the storm. Privacy had become the door through which every lie entered. Yes, I said. Clara's shoulders stiffened. Silas smiled. And did she indicate that she wanted that man to be you? My mouth went dry. If I answered, he would call our feelings a motive. If I refused, he would make refusal sound like confession. Clara understood the trap before I did. Do not answer him, she said. Silas turned toward the crowd. She is protecting him now. I am protecting something that does not belong to you. Your father's ranch did not belong to you either. Thomas struck his cane against the floor. Once. Then again. The hall quieted enough to hear his breathing. He pushed himself upright. Samuel reached to steady him, but Thomas knocked his hand away. Clara, he said. The name came rough, but clear. Clara started toward him. Silas lifted the transfer. Mr. Hart, did you authorize your daughter to sign this document? Thomas stared at the paper. His left hand trembled on the cane. Do not do this here, Clara said. Silas softened his voice. One blink for yes. Two for no. Dr. Avery had once used that method. Silas knew it. Thomas blinked. Once. A sound passed through the crowd, half surprise and half disappointment. Silas answered too quickly. He may not understand which paper I am holding. Clara stopped. So did Nora. For one sharp second, Silas had received the answer he claimed to want and rejected it because it was the wrong one. County Clerk Danner noticed. His head lifted. Silas recovered. Mr. Hart, did Clara sign your name without permission? Thomas's face tightened with effort. Clara took another step. Samuel blocked her path. He needs room. He needs his daughter. He needs you to stop telling him what to say. The accusation landed harder because Samuel believed it. Thomas tried to rise fully. The cane slipped. His chair tipped sideways. Clara reached him before anyone else, but Samuel caught her around the waist and pulled her back. Do not touch him. Thomas fell against the edge of the platform. The brass key slid from beneath Clara's collar and struck the floor. Everyone saw it. Silas pointed before the metal stopped spinning. The disputed key. Clara twisted free of Samuel. That is my father. Deputy Ross picked up the key while Reverend Cole and Nora knelt beside Thomas. I moved toward Clara, but she raised one hand without facing me. Not now. Not because she rejected me. Because if I stood beside her while her father lay bleeding and the deputy held the key, Silas would turn even comfort into evidence. Thomas opened his eyes. His hands searched blindly across the floor until Clara caught it. Samuel stood 2 feet away, pale and useless. A thin line of blood ran from Thomas's temple into his gray beard. He tried to speak. Only one word came. Box. Silas's gaze went to Deputy Ross. Ross closed his fist around the brass key. And Clara, kneeling before everyone who had just watched her father fall, understood that the only object capable of proving his wishes was now in the hands of the accusation. By the time we carried Thomas back to the ranch, blood had dried along the edge of his beard. Dr. Wells arrived behind us in a buckboard and ordered everyone out of the bedroom except Clara. Samuel ignored him until the doctor took him by the shoulder and pushed him into the hall. He needs air, Wells said. Not an audience. The kitchen filled anyway. Samuel paced between the stove and the back door. Nora sat at the table, with Thomas's cane across her knees. Reverend Cole stood near the wash basin, turning his hat in his hands. Even Deputy Ross came, though he kept the brass key in his coat pocket and remained on the porch. Silas did not come. That absence felt arranged. Clara emerged after 20 minutes carrying a basin clouded pink with blood. "He is awake," she said. "The cut is shallow. Doctor says the fall frightened him more than it injured him." Samuel stopped pacing. "Can I see him?" "Not yet. He is my father too." "Yes." Clara carried the basin through the back door. I followed her across the yard to the tack room, where a drain had been cut into the floor beneath an old saddle rack. The space was barely wide enough for 2 people. Leather, dust, and linseed oil held the heat. She poured out the water, rinsed the basin, then braced both hands against the workbench. A raw scrape crossed her palm, where the key's ribbon had burned her skin. "You are bleeding," I said. "So are you." A splinter had opened the base of my thumb when Thomas's chair struck the platform. I had not noticed. Clara took a tin of salve from the shelf, set it between us, and pointed to an overturned feed bucket. "Sit." "I can manage." "So can I." "Sit anyway." I obeyed. She washed my hand with water from a stone jug. Her touch was practical, almost stern. The cloth caught against the splinter. "This will hurt." "It already does." "I meant your hand." So did I. Her mouth shifted, but the beginning of a smile did not survive. She drew the splinter free with a pair of small tweezers and pressed the cloth over the cut. Outside, someone led Thomas's horse into the stable. Hooves struck packed earth, then settled. "I knew Silas had copied Father's seal," Clara said. The confession came without warning. My hand stayed open between hers. "When?" "Last December." "Before the medicine order?" "After." She wrapped a narrow strip of linen around my palm. "I found wax impressions in his desk at the bank. Father's seal." The crescent was reversed, but I knew it. "What did Silas say?" "That he was preparing duplicates in case Father lost the original contracts." "And you believed him?" "No." The knot tightened around my hand. "Then why did you say nothing?" Clara put the salve away before answering. "Because he had the medicine form with Father's name in my handwriting. He said if I accused him of copying the seal, he would report me for forgery. The supplier would testify. The bank would review Father's competency, freeze the ranch accounts, and appoint someone to manage the property. Someone like Silas." "Yes." The tack room seemed to shrink. "You stayed engaged to him after that?" "For 6 weeks." That answer hurt more than I expected. "Why?" I told myself I was buying time. Father was weak. Samuel would not answer my letters. Winter feed was due. Silas knew every debt attached to the ranch. She rubbed her injured palm against her skirt and winced. But that was not the whole reason. I waited. Part of me still wanted to believe I had misunderstood him. I had defended him to Father. I had told everyone he was patient and honorable. Admitting what he had done meant admitting I had invited him into every locked place we owned. The flaw was not trust alone. It was pride. Clara had protected the version of herself that had chosen wisely, even while Silas built a weapon from that protection. "Did you ever help him hide it?" I asked. Her eyes moved to the bandage around my hand. "Once. He asked me whether Father kept duplicate water records in the headgate box. I told him no. Was that true?" "I did not know. But I knew Father had been visiting the gate after his stroke. I knew he had asked the blacksmith to repair the inner compartment. And you did not tell anyone." "I was afraid Silas would open it before Father could explain. So you let me stand beside you at the gate, without knowing he might already be searching for whatever was inside." "Yes." The word carried no defense. I pulled my hand back. Clara did not ask me to understand. She did not remind me that she had been frightened, or that Silas had threatened her father. Those things were true, but they did not erase the choice. "You told me you would give the whole truth at the hearing." "I meant it. You had chances before the hearing." "I know. You let me accuse him of writing a false story while you were still editing yours." Her face tightened. "Yes." A fly struck the small window and crawled along the glass. I stood, but the low saddle rack forced us close. Clara smelled of soap, horse leather, and the cider someone had spilled at the supper. "I am sorry," she said. "I believe you." Relief entered her face too soon. "That does not mean I am ready to forgive you." The relief left. "Accepted," she said, "not erased." Her fingers touched the loose end of the linen around my palm. She tucked it beneath the knot and kept her hand there a moment longer than the bandage required. The space between us changed. Nothing outside had become safer. Thomas was injured. Ross had the key. Half the county had watched Silas call Clara fraudulent, yet her face was inches from mine, stripped of every careful version she had shown the town. I wanted to kiss her. That truth arrived without permission, as direct as the words beside the creek. Clara saw it. Her breath caught, and she leaned forward by less than an inch. I placed my uninjured hand against the workbench, not her waist. Not tonight. She did not move away. Because you do not trust me? Because I want to. Her eyes closed briefly. I do not understand. I will not turn your fear into a promise. I will not use the worst day of your life to become the answer you reach for. And the creek? The creek was true. This is true too. I know. That is why it has to wait. She stepped back, though the movement cost both of us something. If anything happens between us, I said, it cannot start because Silas pushed you toward the nearest man willing to believe you. You are not the nearest man. No, but tonight I may feel like the safest one. Clara folded the bloodied cloth into a square. You are not as quiet as people think. I have been quiet when it suited my fear. She glanced toward the door. Then what happens now? Now you tell Ross everything before Silas tells it for you. And after that? I do not know. It was the first honest future I had offered her. A knock struck the tack room door. Nora stood outside holding 2 sealed envelopes. One bore the Hart name, the other bore mine. A bank messenger left these, she said. Clara broke her seal. I opened mine. Her account had been frozen pending a competency review. My largest cattle buyer had suspended our autumn contract because of questions concerning unlawful access to secured water. Silas had not come to the ranch. He had sent the cost of our honesty ahead of him. The bank sent an inventory clerk before breakfast. He arrived in a black coat unsuited to ranch work, carrying a ledger, 2 pencils, and an order permitting him to record every asset attached to the Hart property. Clara met him on the porch. You may inspect the livestock from the fence, she said. You will not enter my father's bedroom. The competency petition includes the residence. My father is not an asset. The clerk glanced at the deputy standing beside his wagon. Ross had returned without the brass key. It remained sealed in the evidence cabinet at the county office. I am only doing my work, Miss Hart. So was Silas when he copied our seal. Ross shifted his boots against the porch boards. The clerk began with the barn. He counted horses, wagons, harnesses, sacks of grain, and the winter hay stacked under canvas. Each mark of his pencil turned something useful into something the bank might take. I spent the morning hauling water. My well could fill 2 Hart troughs if I drew slowly. More than that, lowered the water below the intake pipe. By noon, mud came up with the bucket. Clara stood beside the wagon while I adjusted the pump rod. You have to stop, she said. The west trough is still empty, and your north herd drinks tonight. We can move them closer to the lower spring. That spring was weak in June. It is stronger than no water. She put both hands on the barrel rim. This is what I meant in the tack room. You are offering more than you can afford, because choosing a limit feels like abandonment. This is not about us. No. It is about you believing every boundary makes you the man people said you were after Anne died. The pump handle remained halfway down. She had found the truth beneath the practical argument, and I disliked her for being accurate. I will decide what my ranch can carry, and I will decide whether mine survives by emptying yours. She removed the wagon pin before I could lift the second barrel into place. 1 load today, she said. No more. The old part of me wanted to override her. Help was easier when the person receiving it did not have the power to refuse. I slid the pin into my pocket. 1 load. That afternoon, Nora brought an attorney from Fairmont. Miss Ada Pike was 35, narrow-faced, and dressed in brown wool despite the heat. She listened without interrupting, while Clara described the medicine form, the copied seal, the telegram, and the missing page. When Clara finished, Miss Pike arranged the facts into 3 piles on the kitchen table. What helps you? What harms you? What can do both? She placed Nora's ledger impression in the first pile. The signed medicine order went in the third. The county can charge forgery even if the act saved your father's life, she said. Intent matters, but so does the signature. I will not deny it. Good. Denial would be foolish. Clara's mouth tightened. Miss Pike placed the bank order in the second pile. Until the competency petition is resolved, You should not sign checks, sell cattle, move secured equipment, or destroy any correspondence. You should also avoid being alone with your father when legal decisions are discussed. Clara leaned back from the table. You are telling me not to care for him. I am telling you Silas will call care influence if no one else witnesses it. Samuel stood in the doorway. No one had heard him enter. I can stay with father. Clara folded her arms. You have spent 3 years away, and you have spent 3 years deciding that made you his only child. Miss Pike raised one hand. This family argument may be emotionally valid, but in court it will become free material for Mr. Vale. Samuel removed his hat. The bank says Clara transferred feed payments through her own account. Because father's account was frozen after his stroke, Clara said. You did not tell me. You did not answer. The attorneys separated them with a question. Mr. Hart, did Silas Vale pay any of your debts? Samuel's eyes dropped to the hat brim. A railroad note. How much? $240. Clara inhaled through her nose. Samuel spoke before she could. He did not buy me. No, Miss Pike said. He bought the right to be misunderstood favorably. Samuel left through the kitchen without replacing his hat. By sundown, the inventory clerk had marked nearly everything Clara needed to keep the ranch alive. Then he attached a red notice to the barn door. No sale, transfer, or removal of secured property. The Hart Ranch had cattle it could not legally sell, accounts Clara could not use, and a water gate she could not open. My own loss arrived in the form of a telegram. Harlan Livestock canceled the purchase of 80 steers. The wording was polite. The result was not. Without the autumn payment, I could cover wages or winter feed, but not both. Clara read the message once. You should withdraw your statement. No. Eli. No. You could tell Ross you were emotionally involved and spoke before you understood the facts. That would be a lie. It would save your men's wages and confirm Silas's version of you. You cannot lose your ranch for my reputation. I am not standing beside your reputation. Her face hardened, perhaps expecting the rest to become a declaration. I am standing beside the truth, I said. I am not asking you to owe me a future. The hardness eased, but not into relief. And I will not move into your house, she said. I did not ask. You were going to. I had considered it. Thomas needed quiet. Samuel had begun sleeping in the front room. Clara's presence gave Silas another argument about influence. My spare bedroom was clean and empty. It was also the wrong answer. Nora has a room above the telegraph office, Clara said. I will stay there until the hearing. You will be alone. I will be somewhere that belongs to neither Silas nor you. The choice stung because it was correct. If anything ever begins between us, she continued, I will not wonder whether I said yes, because I had nowhere else to sleep. Then go to Nora's. She nodded. No gratitude, no apology, only a boundary that protected both of us from turning disaster into intimacy. We packed one carpet bag. Clara took 2 dresses, her mother's sewing box, Thomas's medicine schedule, and a framed photograph she wrapped in a dish towel. She left the ranch ledgers on the kitchen table under Miss Pike's seal. At the porch, Thomas held her wrist with his good hand. Back, he said. Every morning, he pressed his thumb against her pulse until she promised again. Nora's upstairs room contained a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window facing the telegraph wires. Clara set her bag on the floor, but did not unpack. The sounder began clicking below us. Nora called from the office. Denver is answering. We hurried downstairs. She wrote as the message arrived, one word at a time. Land Office confirms receipt of Hart instrument March 29. Clara gripped the counter. Nora kept writing. Original forwarded to Cedar Hollow County Clerk April 2. County Clerk Danner had denied receiving it. The sounder paused, then resumed. Requested certified copy, unavailable. Miss Pike read over Nora's shoulder. Why unavailable? The final sentence came slowly. County reports original destroyed in office stove during records disposal. Nora stopped writing. Outside, the telegraph wire hummed in the evening wind. The document had not vanished on the road. It had reached Cedar Hollow. Someone had carried Thomas Hart's wishes into the county office, placed them in a stove, and watched them burn. The next morning, 3 of my hired men did not report for work. By 8, the 4th stood outside the bunkhouse with his hat in both hands. Mr. Mercer, I need to know whether wages are coming Friday. Caleb Dunn had worked for me 7 years. His wife was expecting their third child. He had never asked about pay before it was due. They are coming. He rubbed the brim with one thumb. Harlan's man says your cattle contract is finished. It is suspended. That is not what he told the feed store. Across the yard, 2 empty bunks showed through the open door. The missing men had taken their blankets. Where did they go? Vale offered them work moving cattle for the bank. Silas had begun repossessing my ranch before any court had given him the right. I went to the barn, opened the cash box beneath the tack shelf, and counted what remained. Enough for wages, not enough for winter feed. Anne's silver watch lay beneath the coins, wrapped in cloth. I closed the lid without touching it. At 9, Deputy Ross arrived with Miss Pike and a settlement offer. We met in Nora's office because Clara would not return to the Hart kitchen while the bank clerk remained there. The telegraph sounder clicked behind the counter, carrying other people's emergencies past ours. Miss Pike read the terms aloud. The bank would release money for feed and medicine. The county would postpone the forgery complaint. Thomas could remain at home instead of undergoing a competency examination in Fairmont. In exchange, Clara would surrender management of the ranch to a bank-appointed trustee and grant Vale Consolidated Water a 99-year lease on the East Channel. There was one more condition. I had to sign a statement saying my feelings for Clara had influenced my testimony at the gate. Clara sat very still beside the window. "What happens to Eli's contract?" she asked. Ross shifted his hat under his arm. "Mr. Vale believes the bank can persuade Harlan to reconsider." Miss Pike turned the final page over. "He is not offering peace. He is purchasing 2 admissions and a water line." "Thomas needs medicine," I said. Clara's chair scraped back. "So we should give Silas the ranch in smaller words? We should consider what 12 days without credit does to your father, and what 99 years without water does to everyone after him." Miss Pike gathered the pages. "No one signs today." A knock came at the door. Reverend Cole entered carrying a folded newspaper. He did not remove his hat. "I thought you should see this before the town does." The Cedar Hollow Gazette had printed a special sheet. Widehour and former fiancé accused in Hart property scheme. Below the headline sat 2 separate stories, made to look like one. The first described Clara's signature on the medicine form, her private meetings with me, and the disputed water clause. The second repeated the old account of Anne's death, that I had left my fevered wife during a storm and returned too late. Silas had not accused me of a new crime. He had taught the county how to reuse the old one. Reverend Cole placed the paper face down. "The church committee voted this morning. Until the hearing, Clara should not manage the relief pantry. Clara had organized that pantry for 4 winters. Who voted?" she asked. "I did." The answer cost him, but not enough to change it. "I believe you deserve a hearing," he continued. "I also believe the church must avoid the appearance of taking sides. Removing me is taking a side." Cole's hand closed around the hat brim. "People are frightened about the water. They are frightened because Silas tells them whom to fear." He left without defending himself. Nora tore the newspaper in half, then into quarters. "That was satisfying," she said. "Not useful, but satisfying." The back door opened before the pieces reached the stove. Samuel stepped inside. His cheek was bruised, and dried blood marked one cuff. Clara rose. "What happened?" I asked Silas why the Gazette knew about the medicine form. And, he reminded me, I was the one who told him. Samuel took a packet of letters from inside his coat and placed them on the counter. They were Clara's letters to him from the previous winter. Most had never been opened. "I left them at the railway office," he said. "Silas collected my mail when he paid the note. He said he needed to understand Father's condition before helping me come home." Clara touched the top envelope. Her handwriting crossed the front in blue ink. "You gave him permission?" "I told him to read whatever concerned the ranch." "You never read them yourself?" "No." One letter described Thomas's failed speech, the medicine supplier, and Clara's fear that the bank would declare him incompetent. Another mentioned that Eli Mercer had offered help without asking questions. Silas had learned both the vulnerable fact and the useful name months before the gate. Samuel leaned against the counter. "He said you were trying to make me feel guilty enough to sign away my share." "Did you believe him?" "I wanted to." The admission carried more weight than an excuse. "Why?" Clara asked. "Because if you were controlling everything, then I had not abandoned you to control it alone." Clara folded the letters but did not forgive him. "Did he cut Nora's ledger?" "No. but he knew a page was missing before I did. Miss Pike lifted her head. How? Samuel pressed 2 fingers to his bruised cheek. I asked him that. The front bell rang. Silas entered without waiting to be invited. His collar was open, and a dark smear marked one knuckle. He saw Samuel and stopped. You stole private correspondence from the bank. They were addressed to me. They were held against your debt. Clara moved between them. You opened them. Silas's control returned in pieces. I reviewed information relevant to secured property. You read a daughter begging her brother to come home. I read evidence that you were creating dependency around your father. His gaze shifted to me. And around Mercer. He placed a fountain pen beside the settlement papers. Sign the statement, Eli. Your workers are already asking whether they should leave. Your feed account will close by sunset. Do not sacrifice other men's families for a woman who concealed evidence from you. The pen rolled until it touched my bandaged hand. Caleb's wife. 4 men's wages. 80 steers eating through hay I could not replace. I uncapped the pen. Clara did not stop me. That made the choice worse. The statement said my testimony had been emotional, incomplete, and influenced by an undisclosed attachment. Every word could be defended separately. Together, they made Silas's lie. The nib hovered above the line. I could sign now and explain later. That was how surrender always introduced itself to me. Clara picked up her unopened letters. You call it peace, whenever the lie gets to win quietly. My hand tightened around the pen. Silas spoke before I could. Anne's sister understood that about him. He folds when the cost belongs to someone else. No one moved. I had never told Silas what Anne's sister asked me to hide. The newspaper knew only that I had left. That sentence knew why I had remained silent. Silas realized it a breath too late. His smile arrived, polished but useless. I set down the pen. Who told you what Anne's sister said to me? He buttoned his collar. You have until sunset. Silas turned toward the door. Samuel blocked him. For once, Silas did not make the threat sound like concern. Move. Samuel stayed where he was. Silas shoved him hard enough to strike the wall, then stepped into the street. The front window framed half the town watching. By noon, the story would be that Samuel attacked him. By sunset, my feed account would be closed. And by the hearing, Silas intended to put Anne's sister on the witness stand. The county hearing was held in the same church hall where Thomas had fallen. Judge Bell and 2 water board members sat on the platform. Danner waited at a side table with the record books. Ross placed the brass key, Nora's ledger, and the sealed headgate box below them. Clara sat beside Miss Pike. I took the bench behind her, while Samuel and Nora flanked her. Thomas remained home with Dr. Wells. Silas had expected me at Clara's shoulder, close enough to make every answer look shared. Silas opened with a sick father, an ambitious daughter, a lonely widower, and a valuable water channel. He admitted the medicine signature had eased Thomas's pain, then used it to make every later document suspect. Fraud does not become lawful because affection is involved. Judge Bell called the first witness, me. Silas rose before I reached the chair. Mr. Mercer, are you in love with Clara Hart? Miss Pike objected. I said, yes. Silas smiled. Then you admit an emotional interest in the result. I admit an emotional interest in Clara. I do not own Heartland, hold Hart debt, control the county records, or profit from a 99-year water lease. Silas lifted the Gazette. You have concealed painful facts before. Yes, after your wife died, you allowed this county to believe you abandoned her. Yes. Why should anyone trust a man who withheld the truth for 5 years? Because I am not withholding it now. Margaret Lowe sat in the front row, older than I remembered. Silas gestured toward her. Mrs. Lowe told me Anne begged you to stay. My wife sent me after 2 boys who would have frozen, I said. Margaret asked me to keep that private. I agreed. Letting the lie stand was my mistake. So you admit your account depends on a private conversation with a dead woman. My account of this case depends on what I witnessed. Thomas directed Clara's use of the gate last spring. The disputed clause gives my ranch no ownership, and Silas Vale knew of Thomas's transfer before he claims he did. Because Clara told you so. Because Nora's transmission record says so. No further questions. Because Silas had used her account, Judge Bell allowed him to call Margaret next. She took the chair. Did you tell me Eli left Anne after she begged him to stay? No. Anne sent him after those boys. I asked him to keep it private. What appeared in the Gazette was the opposite. You said he folds when the cost belongs to someone else. I said he let me place my grief on him. I was wrong. So was I said. I chose the silence. Silas returned to his table without looking at the Gazette editor. Miss Pike called Nora and Samuel. They identified the telegram, receipt, ledger impression, stolen letters, and paid railroad debt. Silas made both look compromised. Nora's license depended on the county, while Samuel stood to inherit Heartland. Then Clara took the chair. Miss Pike asked her name and role at the ranch. Clara answered, then placed both hands on her knees. Before you ask about the transfer, I need to say what I did. Silas shifted at his table. Clara continued. I signed my father's name on a medicine order while he was unconscious. I knew it was not lawful. I did it because the supplier would not release the medicine, and I believed saving him mattered more than the rule. Judge Bell watched her carefully. I also found evidence that Mr. Vale had copied my father's seal. I stayed silent. I was afraid he would report the medicine signature and take control of the ranch. I also did not want to admit that I had trusted the wrong man. I concealed that from Mr. Mercer. I let him defend me without knowing every fact. That was unfair to him. Silas stood. So, the accused admits forgery, concealment, and manipulation of a witness. Clara faced him. I admit what I did. You do not get to enlarge it until it becomes what you need. Judge Bell ordered Silas to sit. Judge Bell nodded to Deputy Ross. Open the box. Ross carried it behind the evidence table, broke the red seal, and turned the brass key. The high wooden front hid his hands from the benches. Metal scraped once. He passed Miss Pike a folded envelope, a carbon sheet, and a water schedule in Thomas's handwriting. Everyone saw the papers come from the box. No one could see where inside it they had rested. Miss Pike held the carbon sheet toward the window. Faint lettering remained across its surface. The transfer language matched Nora's telegram. Clara, as acting manager. Emergency East Channel use for Mercer Ranch. No ownership conveyed. The envelope was addressed to County Clerk Danner. Danner went pale at the side table. Miss Pike asked, "Did your office receive this?" "I received an envelope from Denver." "What happened to it?" Danner's mouth opened, but Silas answered first. "The existence of a carbon copy proves nothing. That sheet was never inside the hidden compartment." No one had mentioned a hidden compartment. Clara's voice stayed level. "How did you know there was one?" Silas glanced toward the box, then at Samuel. Samuel reached inside his coat and placed a bank envelope on Miss Pike's table. "Silas sent me this before I came home." Inside was a list of questions Samuel was supposed to ask Thomas. The final line read, "If he mentions the inner box, say Clara has been coaching him." Silas pushed back his chair. That letter was private legal preparation. "It was written 4 days before the deputy sealed the gate," Miss Pike said. Judge Bell turned to Ross. "Was there a hidden compartment?" "Yes, behind the lock plate." Silas's hand closed around the edge of his table. Judge Bell turned to Danner again. The clerk wiped his palms on his trousers. "Mr. Vale came to my office after the land document arrived. He said the bank needed to inspect it before recording because Hart Ranch secured several loans. He took it into the records room." Miss Pike asked, "Did he bring anything else?" Danner swallowed. "A page, cut from Mrs. Briggs's transmission book." The Denver reply. "He said he had taken it when he returned the receipt in March." Nora's chair creaked behind us. "He told me the telegraph confirmation and the county original had to disappear together," Danner said. "Otherwise one would prove the other." "And the stove?" Danner stared at the floor. "He said the document was defective. He put it in himself." Silas stood so quickly his chair struck the wall. "You approved the disposal." "I was afraid of the bank." "You were paid to keep lawful records." "And you were paid to protect loans," Danner said. "Not burn ownership papers." Silas turned toward Clara. "This does not erase the signature you forged." "No," she said. "It does not." His control broke on the answer. He had expected denial, outrage, anything he could call hysteria. Clara rose from the witness chair. "I will answer for the medicine form. I will answer for my silence. I will answer for trusting you, after I knew better." She pointed toward the open box. "But I will not answer for the story you built from those mistakes." Silas's face hardened. "You would have lost that ranch without me. Then I would have lost it honestly." Judge Bell suspended the competency petition, restored Clara's temporary management authority, and ordered the East Channel reopened before sundown. The forgery on the medicine order would be reviewed separately. The county marshal was instructed to investigate Silas, Danner, and the destroyed record. No one applauded. Real victories rarely know when to behave like endings. Outside, people gathered around Clara, with apologies that arrived too quickly and explanations that arrived too late. She accepted none of them. Ross returned the brass key. Clara closed her fingers around it, then walked past me toward the waiting wagon. I did not follow. She had won the right to leave that building without anyone deciding where she should go next. The East Channel reopened before sunset, but the water took nearly an hour to reach the Hart troughs. Clara stood beside the lower pasture while the first muddy stream entered the dry basin. The cattle pressed against the rails, and she released them in smaller groups so none would be injured. No one in Cedar Hollow called that work heroic. That was why I trusted it. The county investigation continued through August. Danner resigned. Silas was charged with destroying a public record and interfering with secured property, but his lawyer kept him free while the case moved toward Fairmont. Some people stopped speaking to him. Others said a man should not lose everything over one mistake. They had not offered Clara the same mercy. The medicine signature remained under review. Miss Pike expected a fine rather than imprisonment, but Clara refused to deny what she had done. "The reason matters," she said. "It does not make the name mine to use." Thomas recovered, though he tired more quickly. Samuel stayed at the ranch. He and Clara learned to work beside each other before they learned how to forgive. "Feed is ordered. I saw. Doctor comes Friday. I know. It was not warmth, but it was a road toward it. My cattle contract was never restored. I sold Anne's silver watch to cover the final week of wages and bought less winter feed than I wanted." Clara heard from Caleb Dunn and came to my barn, carrying the money in an envelope. I handed it back. "This is not a debt between us. It became one when your men were paid with something that belonged to Anne. The watch belonged to me. And what did it cost? More than the dollars. Less than keeping it forever, because using it felt like letting go. I chose to sell it." Clara slipped the envelope into her coat. "Then I will respect the choice. I do not have to like the cost." That was how we spoke for a while. Carefully, honestly, without pretending truth made everything painless. By September, Clara had moved home from Nora's upstairs room. Reverend Cole apologized before the same committee that had removed her from the pantry. She accepted, then asked another woman to manage it through winter. Crowded halls still changed her breathing. At the first Sunday supper she attended, a spoon struck a glass near the platform. Her hand closed around the table before she realized no one was calling for attention. I moved the water pitcher closer. She poured a cup and stayed until dessert. People apologized to me too. Most said they had never truly believed the story about Anne. That was another lie, offered as comfort. Margaret Lowe came to the ranch alone. "I should have brought this to you before the hearing," she said. "You came when it mattered. Not soon enough." Before leaving, she gave me Anne's last letter. It contained no revelation, only notes about the cold, the leaking roof, and my torn gloves. At the bottom, she had written, "Bring the boys home if you can, then come home to me." I kept the letter, not as proof. Proof had ruled enough of my life. The first hard frost arrived in October. I found Clara beside the repaired fence where the creek bent toward the cottonwoods. The original brass key rested in the headgate lock. A second key lay on her palm. "I had another one made," she said. "For Samuel. He has one for the barn office." "Then who is that for?" Clara turned it between her fingers. The summer had not made her fearless. She still watched approaching wagons longer than necessary and fell quiet when too many people entered a space. But she no longer hurried to make her discomfort convenient for everyone else. "I need to ask you something first," she said. "All right. When you stood beside me, was any part of you trying to prove you were not the man who left Anne?" The honest answer took longer than the flattering one. "Yes. And now? Now I know standing beside you does not give me the right to decide for you. It does not make your choices mine, and it does not repair what happened to Anne." A cottonwood leaf landed between my boots. "Good," she said. That sounded less like approval than I hoped. It was approval. I am learning not to decorate it. She approached the fence, but did not cross. "At the hearing, I wanted to follow you outside," I said. "I know. I stayed because you needed to leave by yourself. I know that too. What do you need now?" Her fingers closed around the duplicate key. Ask me properly. The words brought me back to July, the heat, the rusted lock, and the sentence I had spoken before I understood the cost of wanting someone openly. Clara Hart, may I come calling on you? She considered me with unnecessary seriousness. Ask me tomorrow. Then she walked toward the ranch house with both keys in her pocket. I laughed after she was gone. The next morning, I returned before breakfast. She was already at the fence. Thomas sat on the distant porch beneath a blanket. Samuel repaired a wagon wheel near the barn. Ordinary work had resumed around a family that was not healed, only trying. Clara held out the new key. I was hoping you would come back. I took it. The metal was colder than her hand, and lighter than everything it represented. It did not make me an owner of the gate. It did not erase the hearing, the money we had lost, or the truths we had withheld. It meant she trusted me with a way in. Not the only way. Not forever without question. Just a way in. I climbed over the fence instead of asking her to meet me halfway. Months later, Clara still flinched when someone struck a spoon against a glass. I still paused too long before correcting a lie about myself. Samuel still left some meals early. Thomas still reached for words that never arrived. Silas had not vanished. Neither had what he had done, but when Clara carried the brass key, it no longer looked like evidence. It looked like a choice she could make and remake. Some people do not destroy you by shouting. They do it by writing a version of you that everyone else can believe. And sometimes, the person who changes your life is not the one who fixes it. It is the one who stands close enough to say, "No, that is not what happened," then steps back far enough to let you tell the rest. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to fight for the truth of your own life? And if you want more stories like this, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.